Hi, hello, and welcome to Lily's Library. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite horror standalones. A couple weeks ago I spoke about my favorite sci-fi and fantasy standalone books and thought it'd be a good idea to do the horror ones as well. So we're just going to get straight into it. So we've got a decent stack here, so we're just going to go through all of them. First on my list is one I actually listened to as an audiobook and I really enjoyed, and a couple years ago I finally got myself a physical copy. It's something I've been meaning to reread, so I might try and get to it soon, but that is Ring Shout by Djeli. This is one of two books I've read by this author and I absolutely adored this one so much. The audiobook of this is so well done and just so entertaining and engaging, but also deals with the seriousness of this topic. So this is kind of set in an alternate version of the US in a way. It's set in 1915 where the Klan are a very big thing. If you couldn't tell by the cover, that's what this has to do with. And we follow characters who are actually hunting these demons and killing them because they are just trying to end the world and destroy the world. It's very interesting the way that everything goes about, and it's kind of more to do with the horrors of people and the horrors of the Klan really than like actual like supernatural elements really or anything super gory. It's just such an interesting and thought-provoking read and something I think a lot of people should pick up. And Djeli's writing is just absolutely incredible and it's just such a fascinating read. Next, I've got Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. I absolutely loved this book. It's got some of my least favorite things in horror in it, and by that I mean things that like genuinely unsettle me and make me feel just like super uncomfortable and nervous and everything. So I just loved how it was done. But this is a Indigenous horror. It's written by a Canadian author, I'm pretty sure. I think this is her only book. I haven't seen anything else from this author. Yeah, I think this is literally her only book, but I really enjoyed this one. In this, we follow a young woman, Mackenzie, who has been having these really odd dreams about crows. And one morning she wakes up and is holding a crow skull in her hand and kind of realizes something needs to change and she maybe needs to go home. All of this has kind of started after one of her sisters died and her grandmother died as well. And she kind of didn't really do anything to process that grief. She ended up just running away and kind of leaving it. And she's realized that that's maybe what is actually harming her and hurting her, and that she might actually need to go home and connect with her family again to help with this healing process. And once she gets there, she starts trying to piece together what actually happened to her sister, and we kind of jump between what happened that day that her sister died and all of the events beforehand and after it as well. And it's just such an interesting tale of grief, and it's just so beautiful and so incredibly well written. And like I said, the kind of monster and the horror elements of this are so unsettling and creepy and things that like genuinely make me very uncomfortable because it is like, it's just so interesting. It's rooted in a lot of Indigenous mythology as well, especially for Cree people and for this area in Canada. And I just found it so fascinating and such a great read. I feel like Indigenous horror is just one of those genres that is just always done so well, and they have so much history to them that it just makes so much sense and makes it so much more horrifying, if that makes sense. For another one that has to do a lot with grief, I've got Monstrilio. This is by Cordova. I spoke about this in another video recently because we've also got queer representation in this, which Bad Cree has also got some queer characters as well. I think we've got non-binary and some other queer spec characters in it. But Monstrilio is at the forefront a tale of grief. This is a literary horror more so than just a normal horror, I would say. We follow a mother who her son has just died, and once he is dead, she carves out a piece of his lung and keeps it in a jar and slowly feeds it until it grows into this creature that they call Monstrilio. It's told throughout 4 different parts at 4 different stages of these people's lives. So we've got the mother when she is going through this time period when she has just lost her son, and kind of a couple years later. We've got a family friend who is actually in love with the mother. We've got the father as well after he is estranged from his wife and like years after everything that happened and is kind of navigating that. And then of course at the end we follow Monstrilio. It has a lot to do with like processing grief and the loss of a loved one, how that grief transforms and can feed into such a monstrous thing, as well as kind of the way it impacts so many other people's lives and what it means to try and find yourself and to break free of what people expect you to be and are holding on to you being, and what happens when you kind of subvert those expectations. It's really beautiful and depressing and sad and just so thought-provoking, and it just made me really feel a lot of emotions, mostly sad emotions, but I just had such a great time with it. It's something I've been wanting to reread again and probably go back and annotate it. It kind of reminds me a bit of Frankenstein in a way, and the discussions around humanity there and kind of crafting and making someone for your own personal gain, and then that person not being who you expected them to be and then wanting answers from it. It's just very fascinating and just such an interesting read. I just absolutely loved it so much. It does obviously have horror elements in it as well, so seeing as we do obviously carve open her dead son and take his lung, but it's also got a lot of gore in it at times when Monstrilio is growing and this creature is becoming something else. So I definitely would recommend checking the trigger warnings for this because it does get very dark at times. Next on my list is We Used to Live Here. This is by Marcus Claver. This is also queer as well. This originally started as like a Reddit short story series and then ended up getting published as a book. I think the rights have actually been sold to Netflix of this as well, so I really hope it does get made into a movie or a TV show soon because I think it would be very interesting. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the Haunting of Hill House show, some of the things that happen here, but this is such a horrifying and interesting read. I feel like I flew through this so quickly. I actually borrowed a copy from the library and ended up buying my own physical one because I was obsessed with it. In this, we follow a young couple, Charlie and Eve, and they've recently bought a house in this kind of more isolated area. It's a very nice area surrounded by woods, but the main road in and out can easily be blocked when there is storms or heavy rain or snow and all of that stuff. And one night, Charlie is home alone while Eve has gone out to get dinner and some stuff while they're working on the house. And this family comes and knocks on the door, and the father said, "Hey, I grew up here. Can I bring my family in for a tour and show them around this house?" And Charlie is really not sure what to do, but for some reason she does end up letting them in. And it just kind of spirals from there. I feel like I shouldn't say too much more than that, but it's very interesting, the twists and turns it takes you on, and it really does make you question what is actually happening in this book and what is real and what's not. It's just such a fascinating read. It does have a very open ending as well. So if that's something you're not a fan of, or that's something you don't really like in books, you might not like this one, but it is so fascinating. At the end of the chapters as well, we also have Morse code that actually is put together to make its own sentence and stuff. I'll see if I can find an early one. Yeah, so we've got different like transcripts from things, and then at the end of them, we've got some Morse code down here, which all line up to make something at the end, which is I think is such an interesting and unique concept. It's not something I have seen in books before, but this is just such a overall interesting read and will really make you question everything and really make you think about what is actually going on and try and piece everything together. It's again something I really want to reread and try and see if I can navigate and find out more of, but it is just such a fascinating and unique read. The last two books I want to speak about are by one of my favorite authors. The first one is actually the first book I read from this author, and that is The Only Good Indians. These are by Stephen Graham Jones. I thought this was such a wild and unhinged and disturbing and gross read. It was a bit slow to start on, but once it got into it, it was so the end part of it just like gave me shivers and goosebumps as well. It was just so unsettling and just such a gross thing, but I really loved this one. But this one kind of starts 10 years before the main events of our book, where a group of young Indigenous men go hunting in an area they're not supposed to go, and they end up killing some elk, and one of those elk are actually pregnant and a mother, which is not something they're meant to be doing. They broke a lot of rules to go into that land, into that area, and hunt there when they're not meant to, and because of what they did, that turns around to bite them in the butt a decade later. We kind of follow them as different things start happening. Some of them end up getting killed, and people just write it off as another dispute between Native Americans and white people. And then another one is kind of his slow descent into madness in a way. It's another thing where it kind of makes you question what is actually happening and what's in this guy's head, and if anything that he's experiencing is real. But we kind of just follow these men as this shit goes down, and they start getting haunted by this entity of this elk that they killed all those years ago. It is so interesting and disturbing and gross. It is really brutal at times. I don't know how to put it into words, but Stephen Graham Jones does a really good job with his horror in this. There's so many different elements of it, like the physical horror as well as that just impending sense of dread and that fear and feeling of being followed by something and not knowing where it is, or just turning back and seeing it constantly behind you. Just, it is done so well. There's always something lingering at the sides that is haunting this narrative, and it is just such an incredible book. It's another really heavy one though that I do really recommend checking your trigger warnings for. There is animal cruelty in this. There is some very brutal and full-on deaths in this. It is very violent, but it is done in such it's just done in such a thrilling and interesting sense, and it is just absolutely devastating in so many ways. And I still think about some of the last scenes in this book because it was so haunting and scary, and I just loved it. Then finally, I've got another Stephen Graham Jones book, which is one of my favorite books from this year, and that is The Buffalo Hunter. This is actually a vampire horror book. It's something that I found to be really unique within vampire stories as well, since I have been reading a bit more of them over these last few years. But this was just so devastating and sad as well. Like kind of P. Djeli Clark's book, it doesn't look just at the actual horror and supernatural elements, it's also kind of about the horrors of people. So in this one, our story starts off with this young woman who is working at a university, and someone reaches out to her saying that they found her relative's journal hidden in the wall of a building that is being worked on. And she ends up getting sent scans of this and is trying to piece together this story of what happened to her relative, who was a pastor or something, or some guy that worked in a church in this time period. We kind of jump between her reading these diary entries and these journal entries and piecing the story together, as well as actually being there when all of this is going down. So we follow him as this vampire comes to his church and is basically confessing to him and telling him the story of everything that happened. But yeah, and then we follow this man as he is hunting these buffalo hunters who are basically just killing all the bison and buffalo so that the Native Americans cannot have it. It has to do with the colonial American period, as well as a massacre of Blackfeet. So it's very devastating and very thought-provoking and just really, really sad as well. This will make you really mad for everything that has happened, and it really opened my eyes to a different part of American history that I wasn't really aware about, and I just found it to be such an interesting and beautiful and just absolutely insane read. I said before that it's a very unique vampire book, and it's about the way that the vampires in this world work. I don't really want to go into the exact spoilers of it, but it's about how the way that they drink blood and what that blood does to them. I found that to be really fascinating, and the way it was used to kind of twist and turn the journey that this character went on was just so interesting. I thought the last couple chunks of the book as well were very messed up as well in their own way, but it was so interesting seeing the way everything wrapped up, and this woman decades or centuries after the events happened, her trying to kind of right her ancestors' wrongs and try and fix things in any way that she can. I just found it to be such an interesting and incredible read. But these are a bunch of my favorite horror standalones. No doubt I will have more in the coming months as I do go into reading more horror. But let me know if you have read any of these or what your favorite horror standalone is. But yeah, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and you can follow me on my other social medias as well. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye.